In the last lecture, we learned how to render content dynamically, conditionally, I should say, and that we simply take advantage of the fact that everything here is JavaScript. And that's generally the mantra of React. Everything is JavaScript. I also mentioned that using this ternary expression as we do here is not necessarily optimal. Here it's perfectly fine, but as our application grows and as we possibly nest conditions, it can be hard to keep track of which expression is responsible for what and to spot them in our JSX code. So there is a cleaner solution for that, which I want to show you in this lecture. Let me remove this curly brace and this ternary expression here, so that for the moment, all the persons are rendered all the time again. Whoops. I should make sure to only remove the expression parts, not the div though. So with that, we're back to the starting point. Right now we can't toggle this. Now keep in mind, everything is JavaScript. And in the end, what we're doing here with JSX is just that we're returning it with the return statement in this render method. Now there's one important thing to keep in mind. When React renders something to the screen, when it decides that it needs to update the screen, it executes this render method. And not just the return expression there, everything here. So everything inside the render method gets executed whenever React re-renders this component. And therefore, we can take advantage of this. We can add some code here before we return something. I'll add a variable named persons here, which I'll set to null. Now this should be the default. You could give this any other name you like. Then I'll add a normal if statement. I can do this here because I'm not inside JSX. I'm inside my normal JavaScript code here. And there I now want to check if this state show persons. Keep in mind, show persons is a boolean, so it's either true or false. We don't need to necessarily compare it to true or false. We can omit this. So now I have this check. And if this is true, then I want to set my persons variable to some JSX code. And always keep in mind, I could also just set it to the result of React create element. This is just what JSX compiles to in the end. Now I will grab the code here, my persons. I will cut the div down there with the persons inside and add it in here. Now what I'm doing is the following. By default persons, this variable is null. But if this state show persons is true, persons actually holds this JSX code. And with that, I can just take that persons variable and output that down here in my JSX code I return in the end. So with single curly braces, I can output persons here, referring to that persons variable, which is either null by default or persons if show persons is true. And since render gets called whenever React checks if it needs to re-render this page or this component, I should say, since this happens every time a re-render occurs, we make sure that we always take the latest state we have into account and either render nothing or the persons. Because keep in mind, one of the two things triggering an update is a state change. Now with this, let me save this file and go back to the application. There, we go to the console, we don't see an error. I can reload the page to clearly see that we are using the latest version. And now let me click toggle persons. And as before, you see the same behavior. We can really toggle this. But now we're using this more elegant way of kind of outsourcing this check from the JSX we return to a variable we conditionally assign before returning. Still in the render function though, but before returning this. With that, we keep the JSX we return, and therefore our core template of this component, you could say, we keep it clean. And we make sure that we only have this tiny reference here, persons, inside of it to either render nothing or all the persons. This is actually the preferred way of outputting conditional content, and it's the way I would recommend using.